The Climate Action Reserve is the most experienced and trusted offset registry to serve the carbon markets. As more organizations look to combat climate change and support environmental projects with true integrity, they turn to the reserve to foster real solutions and reductions in greenhouse gas emissions. Through Carbon Connection, the Reserve's in house experts will explore our high quality standards for carbon offset projects and discuss climate change practices that benefit economies, ecosystems, and society. Thank you for joining.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lauren Wilson, and welcome to our very first episode of Carbon Connection, hosted by Climate Action Reserve. Today, we are speaking with our in house expert, Amy Kessler, on the first Mexican mangrove project registered with Climate Action Reserve. Amy serves as the Reserve's Director of Latin America and has been deeply involved with this project. Amy, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Lauren.
Great. So, just to kick things off, why are mangroves critical to addressing climate change?
Great. Thank you so much for this question. And yeah, thank you for inviting me again. So, mangroves are really critical ecosystems. First, they are coastal ecosystems characterized by their complex root systems and found in tidal and tropical regions. Mexico, which of course is where we have our first mangrove project, has one of the largest mangrove ecosystems covering more than 750,000 hectares of their coastline. And these wetlands are vital to the health of the planet due to the ecosystem services they provide, such as providing habitat for fisheries and diverse flora and fauna, acting as a natural barrier to storms and preventing runoff or soil erosion, in addition to their significant carbon sequestration potential.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate your analysis of mangroves. Can definitely see how, they're critical to not only the environment and everything in it, but to the way that communities can really banter off them as well. So, in a nutshell, why was this project developed?
Great, yeah. So the project was developed directly by the Ejido San Crisanto and their sister foundation, Fundación San Crisanto. And this ejido has a very long history and relationship with the mangrove forests in which the ejido exists. However, the forest was degraded, including from a hurricane many years ago, causing loss of ecosystem services and biodiversity. So the ejido needed to look for ways to restore the forest and enhance its resiliency, which of course requires resources to invest in the forest. And that's where the carbon project comes in to be able to provide those resources needed.
Great. And why was this such an achievement for Climate Action Reserve, but also this community that we were able to register this first ever mangrove project?
Yeah, absolutely. So despite being a very critical habitat and their significant sequestration potential, there really aren't many mangrove carbon projects globally. So mangroves present a number of specific challenges for carbon methodologies. For example, mangrove forest is very dense and, of course, at times underwater, which can be very challenging for taking field measurements, particularly heights. In addition, unlike terrestrial ecosystems, mangroves store substantial amounts of carbon in their roots and in the soil, which can also be very costly and challenging to measure accurately. So, through working with the Fundación San Crisanto and other experts in mangrove ecosystems and carbon methodologies, we had to learn a lot and adjust the protocol accordingly so that mangrove projects could be eligible and be cost effective. So, really, it was quite a effort amongst many actors to make sure that mangroves could be incorporated into the protocol appropriately. And yeah, of course, really excited to have the first project out there.
That's amazing, and even more exciting to hear that with this community, they didn't have the lack of mangroves because of hurricanes, and then with this project being able to come in, bring financing, and enable this community to build up the mangroves a lot. So, would you be able to touch a little bit more on how this project was specifically impactful to the local community?
Yeah, absolutely. So first, the community, or in this case, it's actually an ejido,
Mhm.
depends on the mangrove forest in a number of critical ways. So, for example, the fisheries that the mangrove forest provides, that of course accounts for economic opportunities for the community, the protection of storms and hurricanes, as well as ecotourism opportunities. So, this community also offers ecotourism, which goes really great with the project. And then, of course, the carbon project itself has many direct impacts for the community. So specifically, it includes the generation of employment for community members that participated in the inventory development and the monitoring, reporting, verification activities. So it's actually the community members themselves that go out there and do the measurement of the trees to be incorporated into the carbon inventory. And of course, that's employment, right? That's paid work. So along with that, we also go, the capacity building that provides. So those community members have now been trained and now have the capacity and the knowledge and the experience of this project so they can go on to support other communities in development of mangrove projects. And then, of course, there's the sale of credits, right? That's probably the most known benefit or impact from carbon projects. Um, and this project specifically, of course, because it is a mangrove project, which again, mangrove projects are quite scarce or rare, and generate so many co-benefits. In this case, the Hilo was able to obtain a relatively high price point for these credits, which of course will then provide revenue for the Hilo to invest in the mangrove forest itself, but also to support other social programs and needs that the Hilo decides upon.
And that's awesome. It really just sounds like a win-win across the board. You're able to bring in, new job opportunities, bring in revenue for the ejidos, as well as impact the environment, which, we're all trying to do as part of our everyday job. So that's really exciting. And as this is a new project, what are some of the key eligibility criteria other organizations should be on the lookout for to submit their own mangrove projects through climate action reserve programming and specifically the Mexico Forestry Protocol?
Right, absolutely. So I think for any carbon project, one of the key eligibility criteria is absolutely additionality. And for mangrove projects specifically, in this case, under the Mexico Forestry or Forest Protocol, they could be entered or eligible under reforestation or restoration activities. Those are most likely the two activity types that they would be entered under. And for reforestation activities, if the project is completely reforesting or planting a new mangrove forest where there hadn't been a forest for several years prior, or in the area that had recently been affected by a natural disaster, the additionality criteria is pretty evident, right? So we can very clearly identify additionality and allow those projects to be eligible. Alternatively, if they enter as restoration activities, so if there is already an existing mangrove forest, they could be eligible as restoration, in which case, under the Mexico Forest Protocol version 3.0, we've developed a standardized additionality test using the data and monitoring tools from Mexico's National Commission for the Knowledge and Use of Biodiversity, or CONABIO, along with remote sensing applications to demonstrate historic evidence of anthropization and fragmentation or degradation, in which case we use that to then again justify or identify the additionality of the project.
Thank you, me. That's really helpful, and it's great to hear it outlined this way, which I know for folks listening, they'd be able to go into the protocol itself and also be able to look at the things that you just discussed. So that's really helpful. And and with these mangrove projects, something that within the carbon market space we touch on is permanence. So with mangrove projects specifically, how do we ensure permanence of greenhouse gas reductions?
Right. I would suppose to just call it more general, right? So under the Mexico Forest Protocol, generally, we ensure permanence through a number of different mechanisms aligned with different risks or potential types of noncompliance. For example, we require all forest owners to commit to maintain carbon stocks for a period of 100 years, which is the permanent standard required for all nature-based projects with the reserve. And for kilos and communities under this protocol, this commitment is tied to their communal customs and legal processes. In addition, we employ a project specific risk based assessment for buffer pool contributions, which essentially functions as a programmatic insurance policy for non intentional reversals or those reversals that are caused by natural disasters such as fires or hurricanes. Additionally, under the Mexico Forest Protocol version 3.0, which is, I should note, is actually currently being developed and is going out for public comment next week. We've included a mechanism to utilize these contributions to the buffer pool as long-term economic incentives, as we'll actually return those contributions over time as projects demonstrate ongoing compliance. So any mangrove project would have to comply, same as any other forest project under the Mexico Forest Protocol, with these requirements.
Great. Thank you, Amy. And also really super to know that the 3.0 version of the Mexico Protocol, Force Protocol, is coming out next week. Thanks for that heads up for everybody. And what is a typical timeline for a project under this protocol?
Right, absolutely. So it depends on various factors. But typically for Hilo and Camille projects, or always for Hilo and Camille projects, I should say, all project concepts, along with estimated costs and benefits, any project requirements, so permanence, additionality, also what is climate change, what is carbon markets, etc. All these topics must be initially presented to the community's general assembly prior to project approval. And then after project approval, they start their initial project development activities. And that would include the development of their inventory, so going out and taking measurements in the field, which, as I said, is typically done by the community members. Their community members are trained to go and conduct the inventory. Then once the inventory is completed, they develop the project report and then complete an initial verification. Typically, that would occur about a year or at least a year after the start date, though there is some flexibility in the protocol depending on the project type and the decisions the project owner and project developer take. So typically, a project would receive their initial credits about 1 to 2 years from the start. I should also note that under the Mexico First Protocol, the credit period is 30 years. And as I previously mentioned, projects commit to 100-year permanence. So they would continue monitoring reporting on a yearly basis. And typically, they also conduct some type of verification yearly in order to receive credits. If they want to receive credits every year, they would have to conduct a kind of verification, though there is, again, some flexibility in the protocol depending on the type of project and the way in which the project is structured based on, different factors.
Definitely understood. See that there's flexibility with each project, but we're definitely seeing the similarities across the board with this protocol. And who are the type of people and organizations that would be interested in developing mangrove projects?
Right. So I guess, there's no strict requirements on who can develop mangrove projects on the protocol or and within the protocol. So really any project developer could support the development of mangrove projects. Though, of course, like with any carbon project, the test is always verification. So you have to ensure that you get pass verification. So project developer in this case would need to make sure that they really follow the specific considerations and requirements for mangroves and, likely would be very beneficial if they had experience with mangrove ecosystems. I'd also note that I think generally, it's helpful if if the project developer is either, the direct forest owner, community, or HEDO, or has some historic presence in the area and has worked with the forest owner for some time before, and there's a foundation and a track record of earned trust, particularly for HEDO and communal projects. I think that's very critical. I'd also note that typically within our program, under the Mexico Forest Protocol, most project developers are local NGOs that have that long track record and work closely with the HEOs and communities on a regular basis.
That seems like a very, like you said, critical part of working with Climate Action Reserve, but also just working with projects with Climate Action Reserve is ensuring that you have the community, and in this case, Ejido presence to be able to understand the Ejido's needs and also just to be able to ensure that we are keeping ourselves transparent and working to have the best carbon projects we could put out there. So that's really exciting to hear. So you walk through who's going to develop projects, but who might be the people that would purchase the credits produced from these projects?
Yeah, absolutely. I do want to just quickly note on the previous point. So all project developers do also need to be approved. In the case of the HELOs and communities, they must be approved by the HELO and community. So not only the project gets approved by the HELO community through free prior informed consent processes, but also the project developer itself. So that earned trust and track record of working together is really critical, and then also it is required that the community HELO approves the project developer. So just wanted to quickly note that. And then, yeah, with regards to the purchase of credits, for this initial project, the HELO decided to work with Climate Seed to support the commercialization of the credits. I guess in general, there's very strong demand for quality credits in the voluntary market right now. I'm sure we've all heard of the boom in the market. And I'd say particularly credits that generate such additional social and environmental benefits, right? So buyers are going more and more in this direction and really demanding these co-benefits be present within the projects and credits they purchase.
Right. And if someone, is working with us, say through Climate Action Reserve, you can depend on that those credits are going to serve social and environmental benefits. So that's, I think, really, yeah, key at the end process. And Amy, I just, first want to thank you for your time today. I think you really painted us a picture of what it's like to start off with understanding the needs of communities and how do we even think about developing a mangrove project to be able to then work with Climate Action Reserve, get that project registered, and at the end of the day, we're hoping to put these credits out there to bring more financial gains into these ejido communities. So really appreciate your walkthrough of that. And lastly, I wanted to ask if there's one question that I might have not posed during this episode that you would have liked to hear, what would have that question be, and how would you have answered?
Yeah. It's perhaps kind of a general question on what the reserve has learned through this initial mangrove project, and what we're doing to support more mangrove projects. I think we've touched on this a little bit, but really just want to emphasize that we're currently developing or updating the protocol. So we're updating the protocol to version 3.0, and that is in large part to include specific considerations for mangroves, such as the additionality assessment I mentioned earlier, as well as to include the methodology for the quantification of soil carbon, specifically for mangrove ecosystems, due to that carbon pool's significance for those ecosystems. We're further including updates to strengthen the social safeguards within the protocol, as we view that as being absolutely critical. And of course, that's really important for mangrove projects that are on communal and Gila lands. And we're updating the protocol to allow for a mechanism to include federal lands, since around 46% of all mangrove forests in Mexico are on federal lands. And then lastly, we're including updates to how we adjust permanence, which I touched on earlier. And those updates will better align project specific factors with the permanence requirements and provide greater benefits for heroes and communities. So pretty excited about this update. And as I mentioned, the protocol will be going out for public comment next week. So absolutely invite everyone to review that draft protocol and provide us with your comments and feedback. Thank you so much, Lauren.
Thank you so much, Amy. And yes, everyone, look out for the public comment next week.